Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Stark Take, the podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. I love connecting with our listeners. Being a Ben Torah in the workforce can feel lonely sometimes, and hearing from other people around the world who are on a similar journey is extremely validating and gives me lots of strength. That is why I am so excited about today's episode. Rav Shaya Klyne has been a listener from the very early days of the podcast, and I was thrilled to hear that Stark Tank is resonating in Manchester, England. Then, another Manchester listener, Saul Clark, suggested that I feature Rav Shaya, who, as you will hear, is a Rav, a Marbitz Torah, and has a business that advises people on the halachic and legal aspects of their estates. We spoke about Rav Shaya's journey, filled with twists, turns, and plenty of siyata d'shmaya. We also spoke about community, gashmius, and Rav Shaya's key principles for successful Torah learning. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that if you enjoy Stark Tank and want to help us grow, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. And now, here's our conversation with Rav Shaya Klyne. I'm Yaakov Wolf, and this is Stark Tank. It's a great honor to have Rav Shaya Klyne, a longtime listener and part of the Stark Tank community, joining us for the very first time as a guest. Welcome, Rav Shaya. Good to be with you.
Thanks so much, Rav Yaakov. It's a real pleasure, and I've been a fan since day one of your podcast. I think it's a tremendous service, really, for the Torah Kehillah to these discussions of learning and Torah and how it all works together.
Right. So you've been a listener, and the reason why you're a listener is because the idea of having Torah at the center of your life, but also parnasa and business that is beyond the strict confines of the Beis Medrash is something that is a big part of your life. So maybe you can tell listeners about a little bit about your journey, your story, and what it is that you're doing now to combine these two.
So it is quite a long journey to explain how I got to where I am today, but it's basically lots of twists and turns with siyata d'shmaya. When we got married, this is going back now 15 years ago, Baruch Hashem, I didn't have any plans of going into any sort of Rabbanus position. We're both from big families, and none of our siblings have gone that way at all. But I like the idea of maybe spending a couple of years in a community kollel. So the plan was to go to Eretz Yisrael for a year or two, and then we have this idea of maybe then spending some time, maybe another couple of years in a community kollel. Being involved in some sort of level of outreach, really, we both like the idea of that. So originally, I wanted to go to a kollel in Eretz Yisrael that would actually be helpful to that end. Didn't get in. Baruch Hashem, we did an LLF, and the only problem is that no community kollel at the time were interested. We looked to go to some places in Texas, and they made it clear to us that the English mentality was too different, it would be too difficult. We tried to get in some community kollel in Europe, but this is very shortly after the recession. They weren't accepting anyone. So we eventually made it back into Manchester. I had to get into a kollel in Manchester, and again, there was nothing doing. There was simply nothing doing. There was no openings whatsoever, and it was quite difficult, especially as my trajectory, as far as I was concerned, wasn't going to work so early. But it wasn't the end of the world, and I started studying law. So now, this is the age of just 24. I started studying law. At the same time as learning a little bit in kollel, not a little bit, learning in kollel the rest of the day, but not in any official format. This was my first man back in England. The next man, I started being involved in a yeshiva in the afternoon. It was a yeshiva for struggling boys. This is Reb A.Y. Goldman's yeshiva. I was learning one-to-one with a boy. I'd been learning in Whitefield kollel in the morning, and also in the evening, I got involved with a student-based Medrash program. This was run by Reb Yoel Gold at the time. He was in Manchester. This is Reb Yoel Gold of all the video fame, and he used to run this base Medrash in Manchester. And I started helping out. This is as I started studying law. This is now a good few months into my studying. The yeshiva started asking me to start giving share 3 times a week. I started getting a bit more involved in the student-based Medrash, and I also joined a kollel which was part of a school, Manchester Masifta Kollel, which is where I was as a kid as well. And fast forward to the next year, Rabbi Yoel now leaves Manchester, moves back to I think LA. He is now, and the Chevra there, who were only a few years younger than me, these students, they asked me if I could take over. So I took over the student base in Medrash. But still, I had my eyes set on a law.
I'm trying to keep track because we're only a few minutes in, but it seems to be at this point, if I'm following correctly, we're around 2 years into your law degree. I think you're learning around 3 Siddharim and have like at least one or two yeshiva Shia roles already now. Am I following correctly?
You are. And I said yeah, exactly. I'll tell you how it was. I was in Jewish grammar kollel. This is the school kollel that I was involved in the morning. In the afternoon, I was involved in this yeshiva and giving shir there 3 times a week. And in the evening, I had now taken over the base of Medrash and I was giving shir there every evening. And I was studying law being a storim. So talking about between 1:30 and 3, that sort of time every day.
And that's normal that you're able to complete a law degree, giving it only an hour and a half a day.
So there's basically two different tracks into law. You can get a law degree, which is typically done in university, or it can be done by distance learning as well. But there's another track into law, which is through the track called Silex, where what you're doing is you're studying everything broadly for 2 years, but then you're specializing in one area for another 2 years afterwards. And it's a bit more flexible. People will often do it while they're actually working in the field already. So it was a little bit easier.
And did you choose that track in order to allow you to be more involved in learning?
Correct. I chose that track because I wanted to still be able to spend another couple of years in learning, and then after those 2 years, the plan was to go into an office.
And already now, I mean, these things oftentimes come with a trade-off. The degrees that are probably a little easier are maybe you can call it riskier as far as the job prospects that will be opened up versus going on full steam to the more intense degree. So already at this point, was that something that you were worried about, concerned about, that you knew that you're going to be more restricted because you were going to this track, which will allow you to learn more?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yes. Yes, for sure. I wanted to get a degree in an area where I knew that the prospects of parnasa would be decent. My mother is a lawyer; she's a solicitor, so I'd seen what it's like that even within law, there's various different options. It doesn't have to be something which is constantly 24/7, but it's still something which has good prospects going forward. Now about 2 years after I'd started studying, and I was towards the end of the first part of my studies, and I was looking for an office, and there was a partner of a firm in the city in Manchester who offered me a job. The way that he offered me the job was I simply went and asked him if I could discuss prospects, and he offered me the job, and also not just Stam offered me a job. He offered me a job that would finish at 3:30. So that would mean that although I'd have to stop doing my teaching in the yeshiva and also my teaching in the school kollel, I'd still be able to continue the base medrash in the evening. It was known as the base, with students, which I particularly enjoyed. I'd also picked up some tutoring jobs as well. So basically, I was able to finish work at 3:30 and then be able to then have a seder. The idea was to go straight from work to a seder with my brother-in-law. We used to learn. We learned Isavaheta, whenever it was, 6 o'clock, and then be home for an hour or so, and then have the evening program. So obviously, it was intense. Also, this boss who appreciated what I was trying to do, he really did, and I've got loads and loads of respect for him. At Hayom, he also said that while I was studying, he'd also give me off one day a week to study because he realized what I was trying to do, trying to juggle everything. So that was the new setup for this new year. This is September 10 years ago exactly, where I'm going into work every morning 9 till 3:30, having a short lunch, and then going to learn, and then being involved in the evening with the student based medrash. For various reasons, after a couple of months, I really felt it wasn't working out. The environment, the main reason really was the environment that I was in. It was a tremendous culture shock for myself. I was in a room together with three non-Jewish sisters who obviously had very different values to myself, and conversations from Koilul and coming from giving shir, it was a tremendous culture shock. In fact, I remember one particular time where I felt that I'd had a win was when one of the co-workers said a word that I wouldn't have said. They said a certain word, and then she looked at me and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry." And I felt at that point, hey, that means that she somehow understands that I've got a different standard. And I felt, I actually felt like a shtickler win. I'm doing something. I'm bringing some sort of kedusha here to the workplace. So that was one thing. But there was other parts as well. The type of work which I was doing, and what I saw the solicitors who were further advanced than me were doing. It wasn't the sort of area I was interested in. And as I mentioned, it wasn't like I wasn't involved at all in the chinuch world, giving shirim world at the time. I very much was. I very much was involved. I was giving shir in the evening to students. I was involved with students. I had tutoring jobs, and I thought, you know what, Shaya? I thought, you know what? Let's stop this. I'm still young. How was it at the time? I was 26, 27. I'm still young. I've got opportunities perhaps in chinuch. Maybe it's worthwhile seeing how that goes for a couple of years, and then restart. Taking a look at my situation again. So before stopping the job, I sent a message to a school that had asked me the previous year if I'd be available to teach, and I asked them. I said, I know this is now a couple of months into the school year, but by any slight chance, is there any opening whatsoever? You mentioned it. Just want to know. Within a couple of minutes, this tremendous I got a response saying, yes, we actually are looking for someone to give a class to the sixth form. Form is the ages of 16, 17. It's going to be a few lessons a week, not every day, but is this something you'd be interested in doing? In a couple of days, it was wrapped up. That's what I'd be doing. I went to speak to the boss, who I felt terrible about, because the boss had given me this opportunity. He understood it was unique. He was putting everything onto me. I sat down with him, and he was so nice. It wasn't just nice, he was supportive. He encouraged me. He said, I completely understand where you're coming from. Like you're saying, you want to give it a bash in the chinuch world, see what happens. Makes sense. You're giving high level shirim in the evening. You've got what to offer. Go out there and do your thing. So
a few very interesting ideas that I wanted to maybe follow up on. The first one is the fact that you mentioned, at least at a few points, that there were opportunities that came to you, that people approached you asking you to help out in different things. And I'm wondering what your advice would be to someone maybe like me, who is never really approached for these type of things, but I do enjoy them when they come up or when I'm able to offer myself. It's like I think that it's a great tool to push yourself in learning, whether you're teaching and getting involved in different things. But for someone who is not necessarily being approached by others, but is looking to create opportunities, like it's almost like I don't know. I wish people were to approach me more often to ask me to give shirim, but they're not. So do you have any advice on that regard?
Fantastic question, Rabbi Yaakov. I've got a couple of things to say. Firstly, as I mentioned, by the way, we're going to come back to the story. We're still way more to discuss. Although I know that this is meant to be a relatively short podcast, but we'll see how it goes. When I moved back to Manchester, I approached people. I approached Rosh Hashiva. I said, "Is there anyone here I can know with? Is there anything I can do?" There was nothing doing. We're talking about nothing. There was no kollel in the entire town that was open. Nothing. For my first 6 months in Manchester, I wasn't part of any kollel. The way that I got involved in this base of medrash in the evening was by approaching Rabbi Gold. I'm here. Is there anything I can do? My first opportunities at giving shir was when Rabbi Yol, I think it was the summer. So I came back time. Rabbi Yol, I think, was in America for the first couple of weeks after Pesach, and I stood in and I gave shir instead of him. But it's a little halacha shir. But it was very much step by step. I asked the yeshiva if I could do anything there. They said, yeah, you can know with the bocha. But then after a man there, they'd heard. I think I'd volunteered a couple of times to give shir in the evening there. Then they offered me another position of giving shir 3 times a week. It wasn't a majorly well paid position, but it was a good opportunity. But I think the point I'm trying to say is that first of all, avada it's siyata d'shmaya. There's no question about it. But also, it does take time. It takes a lot. Rabbi Yaakov, with all due respect, I think I told you a few months ago to do a mission. I told you to do a mission of Bereshit. I made it very clear to you. I said you've got a following. There are thousands of from people now that know who you are. Do it. And I don't know if you've done it yet, but there's no question about it. If you put out on your WhatsApp status, Dirish Mr. Bereshit, and it's loaded, it's here every single day. Even if you don't have a chaver that's live, there'll be people that listen to it. More than that, because you got the following, you could guys in your shul. I'm going to be recording either way. Anyone wants to come. And even if it's just one person, but it's his chayvus. And I think I could be even mentioned this to you in our conversation about this a few months ago. Effective his chayvus for limud haTorah is when you've already committed to giving a share on it. We don't even have to go, to try and explain the psychology behind it. It's poshut. If I've said I'm going to give a share, I need to give the share. If I'm going to give the share and I'm not properly prepared, it's embarrassing. So it pushes me. It pushes me. It pushes me. I know myself. Where again, I think this is something we're going to be discussing later on. I know myself. When I want to learn a new limud, then very often what I'll do is I'll say, right, I'm giving a share on it. Now, of course, like you said, well, who's going to listen? But if you have a way of getting people to listen, and you do, I think most of us do have some sort of network, then do it. I happen to know another person. He might be listening to this. Live here. He's actually a Hasidish balabos who lives in Stamford Hill. Who doesn't? He's not a rov. He doesn't have any position, but he gives a dirush shir, which he made a WhatsApp group where everyone wanted to joins, and he puts it on there. And it could be maybe, we don't know. It could be one person listen to it, three people listen to it. It's irrelevant. The point is that there's a chayvus for him, and that's what you're referring to. So I think many people will be surprised that they do have some sort of network. It's a matter of knowing the most effective way of tapping into it.
Okay, and on this topic of push versus pull and different opportunities that come up, there actually have been a couple of opportunities that have come up. And then what happened to me in my mind and my psychology was, wow, like they want me, like that's so cool, and it really skewed my judgment of that position. Like, well, is it really a good position for me? And there might be costs or disadvantages that I need to think about. But the fact that I was approached and offered and someone wanted me completely blurred my vision.
100% that can happen. 100%. There's no question about it that in our world, let's call it a stella. I think everyone knows what stella means, right? A stella is a position, but it's a position in the world of chinuch or rabbanos. There is definitely a certain level of confidence in feeling, oh my gosh, that means I've made it, and that definitely can blur a person's vision. And in fact, I think I'm going to continue my story for a minute, because I think there's related pieces to that. So back into chinuch, and I was involved for that first year in the school called Yavne. It's a local school, modern Orthodox school. I was teaching a few hours a week there. Luckily, grammar kollel that was involved in the morning took me back. Still very much involved in the evening with the student base and medrash. That was all fantastic. The next year, getting into the full whys and whats, but again, another tremendous amount of siyata d'shmaya, then Jewish Grammar also offered me to give shir to their sixth form, which is amazing. Like you said, not only is it a great opportunity, but it's a massive compliment. I grabbed it. I grabbed the opportunity. This is what I was looking to do. And I've still got in the back of my mind that this is all a trial for a couple of years, right? Then the next big thing which happened is student-based medrash, which I was very involved with. I loved. These are my sort of guys. People who brought them in the same place as me. A few hours than them, helping them out. I'd already started teaching a couple of chasanim at this point, on a couple of shabbatonim, and some of the guys said, "Hey, we love spending time with each other. Why don't we do a Shabbos minyan?" And the guys made a Shabbos minyan. No thoughts of any shul in the future or me being a Rav. I honestly did not think that it would evolve to anything. But the first time we did it, they asked me to come. I said, sure, I'll come. I didn't speak. I didn't sit at the front, nothing. I came. The next time, one of the guys asked me to speak. And eventually, probably after about 7 months or so, we started, I think it was davening every other week. It was Shabbos morning every other week. So this is all evolving. So also, Beis HaMedrash originally was under the umbrella of another organization who now pulled out for very good reasons. They were officially a Kirov organization, and we were just a Beis HaMedrash from students, which again got me very nervous. Mentioned it to one of the chevra, and he was like, "Fine, no worries. How much are you getting paid?" It wasn't a lot. He basically set the guys up with subscriptions, and they were all very happy. Fantastic, because we're now Beis HaMedrash, which is completely independent. with a little Shabbos morning menu, which happens every couple of weeks. And eventually, we even became every Shabbos. It was just Shabbos. Now get to some timing. So now we're talking about, this is now about two to 3 years after I'd gone back into chinuch, and things are working very nicely. And from the outside, it's every opportunity, and I had been given every opportunity. But here was the problem. The problem is that also, again, very quickly, I'd even been offered some like senior position, not majors, not leaders of the school, but more senior positions. And I realized after a bit of time that chinuch is fantastic, it's beautiful. But number one, I found that it was very draining. And although I was able to push myself to teach day in day out, it was draining. Just as an aside, people not make fun of teachers, but they say, "Oh, you teachers, you're so lucky. You've got a month off in the summer holidays, and you do it just for holidays." Teachers need those holidays. Teaching is very, very draining. So that was number one. Teaching was very draining, rewarding, but still very draining. Number one, and number two, the pay was not very good. And although I was able to get by at the time, to realize that if I wanted to continue teaching alone, I was going to have to start teaching more or take a senior position, come to terms with, really, really struggling. Not struggling as in not being able to get through the month, but always be very, very, very careful financially. And it hit me. It wasn't like this at all. There wasn't like a sudden second, but me thinking, do I want to do this? On the one hand, there's no question about this. What I'm doing is extend the dream of a lot of yeshiva bachrim, a lot of sipuk out of it, and there's no question about it. I'm being marbek by Malchus Shemaim. I've got shlichus, and it's incredible. On the other hand, my wife wasn't working in the city earning a massive salary. Hashem, we have 7 kids. We had maybe 4 children back then, and I realized it's time to make some decisions. Question is, where do you go? What, I'm supposed to drop it all and literally go back into an office and basically try and work my way up the ladder? Really, I'm going to do that? Does that make any sense? And there was this tremendous friction, and a few months this was very much going through my mind. And I had a chat with my I spoke to my parents about it. Just not like I'm going through a crisis and I need a solution. It was more like I'm thinking long term, and it could really do with some sort of idea. B'siyat Dishmaya, I remember I received a text one day from my mother. I should have saved the text, but I didn't. And she said, "I've got a really good idea." She said, because I was at that point thinking maybe going back into a law firm. I didn't like law firm. Maybe going to a completely different avenue. Maybe becoming like a life coach or something like that, because I knew a lot of people. My mother said, "You've studied law." I hadn't finished. I'd 3/4 of the way through, and then I just put it all on hold. She said, "Why don't you specialize private client law, particularly in wills? Because wills have a legal element. Therefore, you're going to need someone who understands the law properly, and who's got the relevant qualifications. You're a bal halacha, so you could find a proper niche." And she described to me, how in law firms that she'd worked in, when there was from clients, then often there was going to the solicitor, then finding a Rav who knew, then going back. She said you can be a one-stop shop. She said that it was like a flash of clarity. Immediately, me and my mother started looking into different options of how it would work. Eventually, I shadowed a solicitor in the firm that she worked at the time. Myself back into my studies, both the halachic studies as well as the legal studies. Whatever it was, about a year later, then I was able to set up shop. Mentioned it to the head of the school. I was a bit nervous at the time that the school wouldn't like, their maggid share being a working man, being a balabos half day, let's call it. I went to speak to Rabbi Zulzbacher, Zichron Levracha. He was nifta a year ago. Speak to him about it, and I remember him going like this. He clapped his hands. He went, amazing. He said, that's exactly it. He said, sometimes you hear things that just make sense. I remember, to me, that was like a major relief that it had his haskama, because I was very nervous. At the end of the day, I wanted to continue chinuch but not at a point where I'd be doing it all day. I took a little step back. I started teaching a little bit less. I stopped tutoring eventually, also completely. To continue that, but also having something where I wouldn't be burnt out. A parnassa would be able to sort of switch off. But I was nervous that in the world of Rabbanos, the world of chinuch, that would look funny. But Baruch Hashem, people looked at it as very much a synergy of the two worlds. And even though obviously my job is 99% legal and it's only a small percent halachic, but they respect that it's worthwhile having someone who's ben Torah doing it. When I began in Dayan Westheim, he gave me tremendous brachas as well. He said, this is something very important, and pretty much where I am today, together with the fact that it was 6.5 years ago, Oyer Yerushalayim, which is the shul I'm now the associate Rav, they approached me and asked me if I would join them. To which I said, it's not really up to me. I've got a chevra who, at this point we had a minyan every Shabbos. The chevra took a vote, and they said, yeah, it makes sense. Joined with them. Lemaisa, as it happens to be, of the chevra that davened in our original Shabbos minyan, those students and young professionals, most of them have now actually moved to Eretz Yisrael. I had a picture with them a couple of years ago when I was in Eretz Yisrael. So that's a beautiful thing. That's pretty much how I up where I am today. So it's a story with lots of twists and turns, with tremendous siyata d'shmaya. I'm not a millionaire today. I have the same financial, let's not use the word struggles, the same financial questions and decisions that everyone needs to make. But Baruch Hashem, I think it's a tremendous zechus to be able to juggle both worlds. I feel that as well, it gives me the ability to be able to relate to my balabatimu. Even some kids in the school that I'm working at, sometimes it gives you the extra, a different dimension. Different people relate to different people. At the end of the day, I know many people who would want a Rav who does nothing else, who's kol Torah. And not only that, I more than respect that. I understand that. But there are also some people who love the idea of having a Rav who understands how businesses work, who understands structures of law. To me, stamp of approval was when I was speaking at one of our balabatim. Introduced me. He says, we've got Reb Shaya, who he's the Rav. He juggles both worlds. Very relatable. And again, to me, that was like, oh, thank you, Hashem, for sending me that message that there is something. I'm doing something correct. So that's basically the journey.
Wow. So there's a lot there. And just to ask a couple follow-up questions on that. When you mentioned this juncture you were at as far as your future and really taking a hard look, so you mentioned how you felt that your chinuch was both draining and also rewarding. And that's an interesting way to formulate it, because I think most people would normally think of their job as either one or the other, and you thought they were both. So could you talk a little bit more about how those things can both be true, and what you think going through that process, like what's the ideal that you should be striving for?
That's a question. And before I start answering it, I just want to say got the most respect for full-time rebbeim. I'm talking about most tremendous respect for full-time rebbeim. And they are doing it by and large lishma. They're doing it by and large lishma. Let me explain what I mean by draining and rewarding. And I believe that most rebbeim will relate to this. So many rebbeim have a much harder time than me. I only ever taught, 15 to 18-year-olds. I'm teaching younger children. It's much more difficult. Draining and rewarding. The reason why it's rewarding is because when you take a look back, for example, at the end of a year, and you feel, I am moving people closer towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm moving them along the path. I'm helping the parents in the chinuch of their children. There are children now who are more excited about Yiddishkeit as a result of my input. And I'm a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a very real way. Right? Of course, anyone inherent is a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In chinuch, you feel it in a very concrete way. It doesn't need to be explained. That's what I am. So I'm a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So big picture, very rewarding. Big picture, you've got notes from parents at the end, from parents at the end saying, Mamish moved my son forward. Maybe some notes from children, elves thanking you. You realize you're doing something in the world. Big picture. That's big picture. Small picture is the following. You got to realize, in an office job, then you are answering emails, you're making a phone call, you're planning things, but you can breathe. So if after 5 minutes, of doing something, you feel like just, hands through your hair for a second and just taking a breath, you can do that. You can't do that in a classroom. You can't do that. You not only have to be focused, you're constantly being proactive, and you've constantly got your mind everywhere. And there's classroom management, and there's the child who's completely hyper, who's trying to disturb the lesson, and it's draining. Very simply because of the amount of energy that goes into it. There are days when the lesson didn't go well. I'll tell you straight out. I, Baruch Hashem, as I mentioned, I give shit every single day. But I leave school at 11 a.m. I'm working. Share from 9 to 11 a.m. And then I'm working. Twice a week I also go into Yavne for a lesson. But otherwise, I'm finished at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. today, I met a teacher who's like, he said to me straight out, I can't do this. I said to him, what's the problem? And he described the class. He said they were out to get me. There's no question. I know this guy. This guy's talented. This guy's a talented guy. This guy's a Ben Torah. This guy means, but it's draining. It's draining. And in those days where you're like, oh my gosh, let me just sit in an office. And yes, it's got its issues. It's no job like it in the world. I'm telling you, there's no job like it in the world. And it's different to giving a shir in yeshiva as well. Normally a shir in yeshiva, they're listening, just a matter of preparing properly. School comes with a lot of challenges.
So I guess that leads up to a question which I think about a lot, and I've never actually formulated to anyone, and it might be a little bit above your pay grade, but I do want to hear your humble opinion because you are living it, is that I have heard from senior figures in the American chinuch world, and I heard from senior figures in the Israeli chinuch world that there are not enough teachers. So the question then becomes, wouldn't a model like yours be a good one to solve some of the issues around around the teacher shortage, because you're able to take away some of the day-to-day stress, as you mentioned, out by 11, the financial stress because your income is varied and come from other sources as well, and takes away some of maybe the other barriers to entry that people feel that going to chinuch is not for them. So obviously, as you said, being kol kulo chinuch, kol kulo Torah has its perks. But I feel like if there are shortages, and some of them are very significant, so maybe a model like yours is a good one to find a little more sustainable, scalable ways of doing things.
I would say, honestly, if a person is able to do it, I completely encourage it. Completely encourage it, as in to balance the two. I do know that it's not easy though to find that opportunity. Said that, I know many people that do juggle this. I've got some very good friends who juggle it like this. It happens to be that my own, so it makes it a little bit easier in the sense that I've got more flexibility. I've got friends who work in office jobs in the afternoon who are rebbeim in the morning. That means they're employees. They are employees in the afternoon. I agree with you. The only problem is that the downside of doing half, or let's say working as a rebbe in the morning and working in the office in the afternoon, is progression. Because being a rebbe in the morning, they're not really going to have career progression in the chinuch world unless they then go back into it properly. Because normally to take a senior leadership role, you're going to need to be all day. And also, if you're not in the working world properly, it's going to be very difficult to have career progression there as well. Because again, you're not completely. Having said that, if a person's without any further progression is able to get by with his salary in the morning, his salary in the afternoon, there's a lot to be said for it. Because, like I said, burnout is very real. It's very real.
And the lack of career progression, do you think that is a true barrier, meaning people who aren't working as much are really not as capable of progressing, or is it something that sort of society imposes, you can't really be that good and really be up for a promotion because you're not working as hard as everybody else?
I don't know the exact reason why it won't lead to progression. Meaning, is it because he's not actually doing so much, or is it because it's perceived that way? It's when a boss is promoting, for example, let's say it's a boss promoting someone who he can really feels is completely bought into his business. At the end of the day, if he knows that he's got other things going on, then he's less likely. Now, having said that, if the employee who only works in the afternoon has proved himself very clearly to be a brilliant worker, time, and he can progress, then great. Again, there is something else as well, which we've touched on, and that is there is this concept of a lot of parents wanting the rebellion to be calculator. There definitely is that concept. There's no question about it. Um, and you can't stop that. You can't stop that. It makes sense.
You mentioned that one of the things that allows this to be conducive for you and able to work your schedule out is the fact that you have your own business. And obviously it's something which is perceived as either a possible home run to have complete flexibility, no one over your head, no one telling you where to work or when to work. It could also be perceived and is experienced by some people as the absolute biggest curse because it's all on you and everything falls on you and there are no boundaries and no limits. So how do you approach that, and how do you run your own business in a way that allows it to be juggled with the other Torah things that you're doing?
Okay, something quite interesting about what I do, in the sense that it's most jobs that I get from clients are one-off jobs. Let me explain what I mean. Most clients will come to me. Some come to me in their 20s, 30s. Some come to me in the 80s, 90s. They'll sit down and they'll go through an estate plan, work through what makes sense for their family, and we'll put together the relevant documents, and then that's it normally.
Basically, you're saying you only die once.
No, because that's definitely true. I think about about only dying once, but there are clients that come back to me and they review the wills. Officially, I encourage clients to review the wills every 5 years, and there are many clients that I have done more than one job for. Makes sense. Mostly, it's one-off jobs. It's not like being an accountant where you got recurring income every single year from the clients. Firstly, to constantly have bitachon that more work's going to come. That's Aleph. Constantly have bitachon that the next job's going to come. But that also gives me the ability to manage work. So there's quieter seasons and there's more busy seasons. Very often after Yom Tov, there'll be more calls. I think it's often because simply people are pushing things off until after Yom Tov. And then Yom Tov comes along, and like these things which aren't urgent but they are important, they come up. So regarding that, I always have to be aware in busier times that I've got an achrayas to my talmidim, my balabatim, to make sure my shiurim are prepared properly, make sure that if there's any pastoral things that need to be done, that I'm available. So I need to make sure that my estate planning business doesn't override my other areas. So because of that, what I can do is I can see that my diary is filling up with meetings. I'll be able to say, right, this work, you want to have a meeting, not for another month, and that's normally fine because it's not normally urgent. So I'm able to work like that. I'm able to move things ahead to make sure that I don't have too much of a burden of work at one time. But that allows me then to time on area which I'm supposed to be involved in. Overall time management, it's difficult. It's difficult. It's a juggle. I also have to make sure that I'm motivated to actually get the work done. Therefore, for me personally, I try and set times, actual specific times in the day for specific tasks. So for example, as soon as I've had a meeting with a client, I'll then book in when I'm going to meet up with them again to get everything signed. And I'm also book into my diary of when I'm going to work. I'll set aside a 2 or 3 hour slot in order to make sure that's done. Yeah, my day is basically has different times of what different things need to be done. But time management is an issue. It is an issue. And regarding juggling all these different areas, it's difficult. So for example, yesterday, share which I don't normally give, share pre-Rosh Hashanah share to the ladies of the Kehillah. That takes some more headspace. It's not my regular Mishnah Berurah or Gemara or Sham Shabbos Drasha. I am spending most of the day on it, and I wasn't able to get much of my regular work done. So it's a juggle. It's a juggle. But I think for me, the only way it can work is being self-employed. Say something else as well. My wife has said to me in the past that she thinks that whatever happens, she thinks that I need to be involved in school at 9 a.m. every morning. Having somewhere to be at 9 a.m. every morning gets your day started. Whatever happens, your day is going to get started. Otherwise, it can be like a slow start like this. There. 9 to 11, I know, is properly structured, and in the evening as well, it's all structured. The rest of the day, that's the struggle.
Amazing. You had an interesting LinkedIn post about the community that you live in, and you are the first actually British guest that we've had so far on this podcast, and specifically, I'm sorry. Yeah, and also the first specifically from Manchester. And you didn't really choose Manchester. You grew up in Manchester. Maybe tell us a little bit about what the community is like and what makes it unique.
Okay, so I know what LinkedIn post you're referring to. I'll say straight off the bat what the LinkedIn post was. I had to America recently. I went to America in January ago, and I was sitting down Motzei Shabbos with my wife together with another couple, a couple from Lakewood, and they were basically saying how the age of their cars were maybe 2 or 3 years old, and we noted that our cars, my car is from 2010, so it's 14 years old. My wife's car is from 2006, nearly 18 years old. And I basically said that I'm very grateful that we live in a community where my car is not looked at as a Nebuch car at all. Because when I spoke to this couple, I mentioned that the age of the car. They're like, oh my gosh, no one would drive that sort of car around here. The press, which is the area which I live in Gashmistica, there's only one word to sum up. It's unspectacular. There aren't really many, massive sprawling houses. Standards here are, quite humble. Baruch Hashem, compared to some places in the world, we live in luxury. There's no question about it. Baruch Hashem, I live in a house. We've got plenty of space. Standards are relatively low. The general summer holidays that people go on will be, a couple of £1,000s. And there's a big mile in living in such a community. Since the standards are quite low, therefore there isn't that extra need, to live up to the standards of the Jones or the Cohens. And therefore, sometimes people live in a place where they've got to live to higher standards. There's a pressure. Sometimes, if the husband's not earning enough, he himself will become anxious. He might stop, pressurizing his wife to work more, which is just not the way it's supposed to be. Parnos is an important area. It's part of our Avodas Hashem. But it's part of Avodas Hashem in the way that we conduct our parnosses, that we do it with ehrlichkeit, with emunah, with bitochen. We're able to, actually practice choshen mishpat, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And we refine our midas through our interactions. But once the parnos becomes this area of anxiety where I'm not earning enough, and not that I'm not earning enough to live, I'm earning enough to live, but I now have to keep up with the Joneses, then that's where things go wrong. That's where the anxiety kicks in. That's when the pressures can come in. As I mentioned, it can lead to shalom bias issues. It can lead to mental health issues. And what for? To have a newer car? The difference between owning a car that's 2 years old and a car that's 12 years old, will a person be more happy with a car that's 2 years old? Maybe, but very, very slight. Very slight. Will a person be happier with a holiday that's £15,000 or £3,000? Maybe, but it's very, very slight. At what cost? And no one wants to be a Nebuch. If you're in a place where the standards are that bit higher, then a person's going to feel like a Nebuch if they don't have it, and that causes all these pressures. So I was saying it's a real zechus that I'm in such a community, and like you said, it wasn't my choice. It wasn't my choice. Would I have chosen it? I would like to believe that I would have chosen it, but I didn't have that choice. But those people who are starting out and are looking at where to live, of course, a person needs to make sure that he has a good and it's enough, and he can see the prospects. But the choice of what community to live in can be immense. It can be immense for his mental health, for his shalom bias, just on the standards. And I think it's a very important area which a lot of us, when we're starting out married life and settling down, we don't give it enough thought.
And I'm trying to think, like, what are the takeaways here? So takeaway one is that if you have two communities that could both work for your family, so you go for the simpler one. That's sort of one thing.
The problem is, and this is where it gets difficult. The problem is it's also going to be balanced against the prospects.
Right.
So, yeah, if the parnasa prospects are the same, then if a person can, then it's always going to be better to live in a more simple place.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the difference in rent for example, would just be considered like, think of it as an extra income and you don't have to do anything for it, just have to choose that community. But the other way to think about it is someone's in a community and like, is there anything to do if their community is not up to standards, or maybe to put it wittily, down to standards, as you're saying? Like, is there anything about your community that is done consciously to create that simplicity, or it's just sort of a myriad of factors that can't be replicated and there's no takeaway for here for someone who's living in a community that doesn't have that?
Suppose it replicated, or is it just purely organic? It is organic. I think it is just organic, and it's just the way it is. I think, and I asked some people who could afford better standards, but they realize, there's no need, right? How could it be replicated in a place where they already have higher standards? It will be difficult, but in theory, if there was a kahila which has lower standards, a person could choose such a kahila. Meaning, even here, there are certainly roads we could move, a 5-minute walk to a road where it's higher standards. Now, of course, the actual difference in house prices won't be that much, except there's big and here's smaller. But by a person moving to a road which has higher standards, that means that your kids are going to be playing with kids who go on expensive holidays, who have expensive gadgets, who have higher standards in going out to eat. So even if you live in a higher standard community, you can move to a micro community within there which has lower standards. And that might make a difference of quite a considerable amount of money a year, which would, alleviate pressure.
That's very interesting. I will point out that very sharp Stark Tank listeners might recall that in the Q&A with Aaron Lopiansky, there was a question submitted by the listener, Rav Shaya Klyne, about limudim for Balabatim. And obviously, it's something that you have experience with, trying to figure out different things for Balabatim who you care for as a Rav. So there was a question there. We could put a link for it in the show notes. But maybe just give us a little bit of an overview of your journey in trying to research and experiment with different things that will create Talmud Torah opportunities for Balabatim that fit their busy schedules and are meaningful and nourishing and exciting for them.
We need to realize the difference between yeshiva and an after yeshiva. In yeshiva, nothing else on a person's mind. There's absolutely nothing else. There's no other worries. And therefore, is a very clear motivator to want to learn Torah. Because even for the Shaloi Lishma element, the greatest cover the person gets when he's a yeshiva man is the quantity and the quality. Meaning, if he's a lamdan, that's like the greatest thing, the lamdan. But he's a masmid and a lamdan, pure. That's it. He gets the biggest cover there is. So the way that I've said this over even in Shurim in the past is everyone's got a certain I call it a altimeter. Stoltz is covered, right? Stoltzometer, like a thermometer of it. Everyone wants a certain amount of Shloi Lishma, a certain amount of covered. In yeshiva, the way that you fill up the Stoltzometer is with Torah learning. Very simple. So in yeshiva, you can learn biyun. Nothing's going to happen if you learn biyun. Faket. That's you can learn the quality learning. The person enters into the work world, and he has a real achrayas, an absolute real achrayas that we respect, which is the achrayas of bringing a parnasa. Therefore, that very quickly takes over because it is important. That's the vault. Because it is important, therefore it's going to take over. And all of a sudden, the Stoltz Summit isn't filled up so easily by Torah. And therefore, he doesn't have that natural motivation to sit and learn for hours on end. It just stops. And rather, the Stoltz Summit can very often turn into other areas, Gashmius, because that's the area which is important. But it can quickly take over. And I remember very, very, very soon after I moved to Manchester, a friend who had been in Yale for a while, short conversation with him. I asked him, Chavrusa, he told me, Chavrusa is when you learn, what you're learning. And eventually he agreed that he hadn't learned in 3 months. But we're talking about a guy who learned day in, day out in yeshiva. So it's a real thing. We need motivators. So here's a few things. As I mentioned, I put down a few things on paper.
I love that terminology and imagery of the Stoltzometer. And I will just point out to our listeners, there's a great book, which I have not read. I listened to a podcast by the author called The Status Game by a writer named Will Storr. And I'll read out just the first few lines. Life is a game. There's no way to understand the human world without first understanding this. This game is inside us. It is us. We can't help but play. And then he continues, we play for status. If only subtly, with every social interaction, every contribution we make to work, love, or family life, and every internet post. So this is a book called the status game by Will Stort, which basically gives a Western view on the Stolzometer framework, which you just described very beautifully.
Brilliant, brilliant. So how do we create motivators about him? So I've got a few points. So number one, you need to have a chabura. You need to be part of a chevra doing it together. I'm talking I'm generalizing here. There are yichidim that can find a little corner based on Medrash and learn. But the mile of a chabura is number one, you're seeing people, which is it's got a certain geschmack. So there's a certain of something to look forward to. But there's also the accountability in the sense that these are your guys. If you're not there for a few days, they're going to be asking you, where are you? Which is going to give you the motivation to come. Also, the idea of we're doing this together. You can share notes. You can say, I know with my chabura, often we'll come in on a certain night of we'll be like, I'm so tired. Oh my gosh, we can share. We're up to the same stage. It's very important. So that's number one, a chabura. Two is it's important to have goals, working towards something. And what that does is, because I'm working towards something, if I miss today, I'm a step behind my goal. I want to get to my goal. There's something, it's learning, Shnaim Eichzim Be'iyun, and I miss today, say that. So I'll continue tomorrow. It's nicht gefährlich. Either way, I'm just learning it Be'iyun slowly. You've got to have goals. There should ideally be some sort of accountability of the material that's being learnt, because this gives a feeling of achievement, which in turn will trigger me to want to do more. There's a feeling of achievement. Finally, there's got to be celebration. That means celebration of some milestones of my Torah learning. This could be finishing a Perek, finishing a Masechta, finishing an Omid, whatever it is. Do Chazorah of an Omid. But the point is, there's got to be celebrations of milestones. The ideal would be to do it with the family. That means, on a random Thursday night, you pull out some balloons. Daddy's finishing Maseches Gittin, because then they become your cheerleaders. They can see you've achieved, and you know what? You now have actually a motivation because your family are watching you. Your family are like, "Hey, Daddy, remember that Siyam?" They look through a photo album. Oh, there was that Siyam. When's the next one? So, and if you can't do it with your family, then at least do it together with your Bnei Chabura. Because again, it creates this feeling of, I've got what to celebrate, and we're now working towards our next celebration. Various limudim, the ones that I've tried over the years and seem to have worked. There's number one, there's Kinyan Masechta, which is very much focused on Chazara with a Chabura. That's the way it works is we literally sit around one big table. So there's 10, 15 of us around the table. Everyone's sat with the Chavrusas from the beginning. It's very much focused on Chazara. There's a lot of celebrations. We do Chava, which is excellent. Mamish beautiful, because every 6 months there's another test. So there's accountability of the material learnt. There's doing it with the Chabura. There's goals. There's celebration. So Smichas Chava Mamish has everything built in. I mean, one of the Chavra that did Smichas Chava with me years ago, after he finished the first time, he said, "That's it, I'm doing Smicha." And he got Smicha 2 weeks ago. He went through the whole of Issa Beheta. He showed me his Yora. Amazing. Why? Because he had that feeling of achievement. Dirshu also has this to an extent, although we've got to try and do more celebrations there, not just every year and a half. And any of the Yomis, Dafi Yomi, Amud Yomi, Oraisa, all of them have this element. Again, ideally, the best thing to do be like an in-person Chabura, but even what Rebbe Stefansky's done. At the end of the day, people are a shaykhs to learning. The beauty of in-person means there's that actual accountability. But again, Chaburas, goals, accountability, material learnt, and celebration.
When we did an episode with Zevi Ranitz about the topic of celebration, I can link to it in the show notes. I mentioned Dirshu specifically because there was a great line from Rav Hofstetter who asked the Shevet HaLevi about making big, extravagant celebrations, whether it was too much, not appropriate. And the Shevet HaLevi gave him a 3-word answer. He said, you should be making the celebrations as big as possible. And we can link that episode. And I just want to reiterate something which I said back then, and I have not yet heard back from the Shark Tank community, but I am still very interested. If anyone out there listening to this can help get David Hofstetter on the Shark Tank podcast, I would highly appreciate it.
Wow, that would be amazing. Fine.
Okay, so so I'll just wrap it up. So that was so just to summarize, if I got that correctly, other people and all the social accountability, having goals with the material, having accountability on the material, and celebration, whether it's with family or with chabura, and all those things can create positive momentum. And specifically, you mentioned the Kinyan Masechta and Smichas Chaver, which you have, and the Dirshu, which all incorporate some of those elements and fit into the Baal Batish schedule as well.
That's right.
Okay, Shaya Klyne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure. Been beautiful, Yaakov, and continue your amazing Avodah Kodesh.
Amen. Thank you.